Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we preview tonight's matchup with the Brooklyn Nets. Another touch-and-go injury report for the Bucks in that game, but more importantly, it is the day after Christmas, so we take a look at the gifts the Bucks have gotten this season, and what would you say is your favorite gift? Camille and I dig into that conversation next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day each and every day, and for checking out the Locked On Bucks newsletter. If you have not yet, sign up for free at lockedondaily.com. That website again, lockedondaily.com, to start your day with the all-new and free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. As we record this live, Camille, it is December 26th, the day after Christmas. We hope everybody joining us and listening had a very wonderful holiday with all their loved ones and family members, and that's what has prompted us to this discussion of you reflect on your Christmas of what was the best part of it. And especially when you're younger, what was the best gift that you received? There's been quite a few gifts handed out with this Bucks team of late, these past few weeks, especially. So it led us to thinking, what's the best gift the Bucks got so far this season? I think there's a number of ways you can take this. You can look at things they're doing differently, players that came over in the offseason, young players that have emerged, or whatnot, scheduling, the NBA Cup. So there's many things to point to, and I'm very curious to see the comments here in the live chat and on YouTube afterwards as well. What do you think is the best gift the Bucks received this season? But Camille, I'm going to defer and begin with you. What do you think is the best thing the Bucks have gotten?
Like you said, there's quite a few different ways to go. And initially, when I heard the question, I had two that popped to mind first. So I'll give the honorable mention first before going with the thing I think is the best gift they got. And the first one was just that they're in the Eastern Conference where the standings allowed them to have that bad start and still find a way to get back into it. But what I think is the best gift they've gotten so far this year, because I think it has long-term dividends on it as well, it's just finding some young guys to put into the rotation. Like, that's a gift that this Bucks team has been searching for quite some time. We saw how desperately they needed that injection of youth athleticism last season on the team. And to see Andre Jackson Jr., AJ Green really find ways to be solid parts of the rotation going forward, I think it's been one of the best gifts for the Bucks. Ryan Rollins might be a late addition gift to the tree as well for this Bucks team. So, I think that's the gift I would go with. What about you?
So I'm with you where there's a lot of options here. I'll also give an honorable mention, as you did. And I think my honorable mention and what I'm going to go with are pretty closely tied together here. But my honorable mention is Doc Rivers. Because, and look, I know you probably, so this would be the equivalent of you asked for something very early in the year as a kid and your parents are like, all right, we'll follow that away and we'll give it to you later. But I just think he's brought a great deal of stability to this team. He is obviously a veteran coach that I think connects well with players, all players, veterans, young players, even though we've joked quite a bit, Doc doesn't play the young guys, right, as if he's the only coach that doesn't do that. But more importantly, his demeanor, I think he can cut through the BS quite a bit, but do it in a way that's very disarming and isn't the blunt, angry person that you deal with, where he kind of gives you the compliment sandwich if he's telling you these things that you're doing poorly, sandwiched in between, hey, here's two pieces of positivity, and here's some things that we're going to do well here. So I just think overall, he's been terrific for this team, which I don't know how many people would have said that. Certainly we saw the comments at the time of the announcement of Doc's hiring, but I think he's been exactly what this particular group has needed. And especially when you look at the 2-8 start, it could have gone a lot of ways. And, this isn't Doc Rivers is the only coach that could have saved them from a 2-8 start. But there's a lot of coaches that 2-8 could have very easily turned into 5-20, something like that. So I
Really
think that's
quick,
been big.
to your Doc Rivers point, I do think he's the right coach for this team because of everything that you mentioned. And I think a lot of times when you think about coaches, people boil it down to just the X's and O's and can you make the right in-game adjustments? But Doc Rivers has such a good pulse on just that interpersonal communication and like team chemistry and just making sure guys stick together. And I think for this group, it was really important. We mentioned that last year as well, just because like you have two superstars, you're trying to merge two alpha players who have always been like the lead guy on their team. So trying to figure that mathematics out as well. So like, yeah, I definitely think Doc's a great gift for this team, which I would not have said when Mike Budenholzer got fired. I would not have thought.
No, I mean, I think the general consensus among Bucks fans, when you went back to the time of the hiring, that would not have been the consensus opinion. But I think it's been pretty evident so far this season, which brings me to what I would actually go with. And I think there's a lot of tie-ins to Doc Rivers, but I think their best gift has been stability this year. That it was a very up and down season full of change where you had a disappointing first round. If we go back 2 years, you had that disappointing first round exit against the Miami Heat. We can point to the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. Giannis wasn't fully healthy in that series. I still don't really love the way things were trending. And the way the Heat were playing that year, as we saw, they continued to keep it rolling. But you had that. You lose in the first round. We know all the things that were going on behind the scenes personally with Mike Budenholzer. And you wondered, boy, is this going to be it for Bud? And especially felt bad given that personal loss that he dealt with. And then that's it. And then you move into the offseason thinking, okay, who do we get next? And you think about coaches like a Nick Nurse and Kenny Atkinson that were linked to this team. And you end up with an inexperienced head coach. And we saw the way that things started out. We're sure you had the 30-13 record. None of the metrics were good, right? Like even the offense had some issues in the half court, and it just didn't look smooth between Dame and Giannis. You make another coaching change. It just never felt like the Bucks were on level ground last year. Like even when you would start to build on something, someone would get hurt or the schedule would pick up and you would lose those games. So in many ways, last year felt like one of those games when you're a kid and you're playing Madden or something and it's 28-0 against the computer. Like, all right, I'm going to restart this one. Like that's what we felt like last year, but you're unable to do it. So you move into this year and we pointed to quite a bit of year number 2 with Doc, and he gets a full training camp. They get to install some new things. He's gotten to look at some of the young guys, and you see the 2-8 start and you think like, well, did that even matter? But now here we are. And I think a big payoff is that stability that, Doc Rivers got more of a view at these young guys and has been willing to play and trust AJ Green, Andre Jackson Jr., Ryan Rollins, who we've started to see as well. The offseason moves that they had, which gave them more stability because, again, everything you did in the offseason a year ago was done prior to acquiring Damian Lillard, where those pieces didn't really fit with him. You knew coming into this offseason. We know we have Dame, Giannis, Chris Middleton, and Brook Lopez. Brook and Chris were free agents a year ago, too. So there was that uncertainty, and especially with Brook Lopez. And it just led to a year that you came off of disappointment. But I think this group quietly felt, and not even quietly, they've said this, very good about where they were, not only compared to the prior year, but just overall, that they felt like all these things, more time with Doc Rivers, time together between Giannis and Damian Lillard, the young guys and everything else, like we will be better this year. And after that 2-8 start, they've detoured back down that path where you see, okay, I think this stability is really paying off.
They had faith through the entire time they were going through that losing streak to start the season. I loved how often, I think it was Dame who mentioned it a lot, like teams go on losing streaks throughout a season. It's a long season. It happens. It's just the fact that ours is happening at the start of the season, so everyone's paying attention to it. But they never lost that faith, and Doc Rivers, in the way that he messaged to that locker room, was a big part of it. This team in itself has done a lot of work to come together. Like we've heard multiple times so far this season, how this is the most active their group chat has been, how they're connected. I mean, even the training camp going away, was it Camp Connect for the Bucks this year, where it was like, we want time to just really build that team chemistry, because everyone has families. They do their job, they go home and they be with their families. It's not a lot of time for the guys to, be together and hang out, because it's not a young team where guys don't have families and responsibilities. So for this team, they had to build that together. And I think that them starting the season the way that they did, going through that fire early, is going to be beneficial in the long run for how they come together, for their mentality. And honestly, even it was beneficial to help solidify the rotation for this team as well. I think because of that losing streak, you saw Doc Rivers really trying to find the best pieces to put into the puzzle of like, how can we make this work? And eventually they found it.
Yeah, some additional thoughts on this, what we've seen from the Bucks so far this season with that stability and even footing that they've been on this season. But a big piece of that is what we want to discuss next, and that's the performance we've seen from the Bucks in some of these games that in the past they likely struggled with. So we'll open up that conversation after this on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. You've heard Camille and I talk about our experience using Game Time to get tickets in the past. I've used it a number of times in these past few months. I saw the St. Louis Blues inside a Fiserv Forum, use the Game Time app for all the features that they have. You toggle on the all-in pricing feature. No surprise fees and sticker shock once you get to checkout. I didn't need this, given I'm very familiar with Fiserv Forum. But if you weren't, you can see a panoramic view of your seat within the app before you get to that final screen to purchase your tickets. And best of all, this comes with the lowest price guarantee, where Game Time will credit your account 110% of the difference if you can find those tickets cheaper elsewhere. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. And time now to talk to you about Rocket Money. It's the thing to use to help you find subscriptions you may have forgotten about, especially this time of year when we're all signing up for those free trials with Christmas and Thanksgiving pricing. You forget you have it, and all of a sudden that purchase shows up on your statement. Well, that's where Rocket Money can step in to help you. It is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That is rocketmoney.com/locked-on, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. And as we mentioned, leave your thoughts in the comments as well of what's the best gift you think the Bucks have gotten this year, whether it's anything more broad like Camille and I touched on. If it's a specific player, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Andre Jackson Jr. hype here, maybe even some Ryan Rollins, but leave your thoughts in the comments.
Absolutely.
The best gift the Bucks have received this year. And, kind of ties into stability and the Eastern Conference as well, Camille, but the Bucks have had a lot of winnable games, not even recently, for most of this season when we talk about the schedule, and they're winning those. I know we had the conversation after that Bulls win that Doc himself after the game came out and said, look, these are games we don't win in the past. We don't win earlier this year. We don't win last year. And the difference there, it's not to take away from the Bulls, but the fact that you didn't have Giannis or Damian Lillard and you won 2 consecutive games with both of those guys off the floor. It's not something we saw the team doing certainly during a 2-8 start, but it's not something we saw them do a lot last year either. And that to me, I hesitate to say more than anything, but just as much as Giannis and Dame looking as comfortable as they have, just as much as the defense looking as good as it has, things like that to me are just as important, very important for this group, especially as they continue to move forward, because that's what the Bucks used to do. right? When we think about this era and how it started, where the Bucks were a perennial championship threat, they won 60 games under Bud. That first year, kind of coming out of nowhere, very similar to the Cavs, where you knew they're going to be good. I think they'll be a top 4 seed, but I don't think many of us projected 60 wins in the 1 seed. But those are the things that they did regularly. They beat teams even with their best players off the floor, and they found that consistency. And it's starting to feel like we're getting there with this group.
Not only did those Bucks teams beat teams with consistency, like while you were watching the game, it always felt like it was in the Bucks' control. Like even if
you always felt like there's a run coming.
Yeah, like you just knew like this, the Bucks are not going to let this slip away. Like this lead that they have built, they're going to continue to add to it. The other team can make a run. We know basketball is a game of runs, but we trust it. The Bucks will eventually get another run of their own, and they will shut the door on this team. And that's something that we haven't seen, which is why that Chicago Bulls game was kind of like a refreshing game, even though there was no Damian, no Giannis, but it just felt like that game was in the Bucks' control. Third quarter in that one is when it got a little like, okay, maybe the Bulls are starting to push now. But then like Gary Trent Jr. responded immediately, and the Bucks got on another run of themselves and really put the Bulls away. And to see that come through where you're just like, this is a team that is really figuring it out against teams. Like, as you said, we don't want to discredit any team. It's all professional basketball teams. All these guys are getting paid to hoop. We understand that they're better than most of the population out here. So when we're talking about that scale of like, quote unquote, good and bad teams, like it's all relative to the league in itself. And with that being said, when you see teams like the Bulls or even the Bucks' upcoming schedule, where you're looking at who they're getting ready to play, it's like these are games you expect for a team that believes that they are a championship contending team to be able to win. So if we can continue to see what the Bucks have been doing over the last few weeks, continue forward over the next, 7-8 games that they have, which I think is against some of the lesser competition in the league, I will say, I think it bodes really well for what this team is building on and what they can be, because we've talked about the Bucks schedule ad nauseum throughout the offseason, what we thought was going to happen and trying to project it, and looking at how the things are shaking out. Again, these are the wins that we really need the Bucks to continue to rack up as the schedule turns towards the end of the season for them a bit more difficult.
Next 6 games are against teams below 500, and then you hit a little pocket of difficulty. I don't want to get too far ahead, but that pocket is home against the Spurs, in Orlando, in New York against the Knicks, home against the Kings, home against the Magic. And shortly after that, you got the Sixers at home as well, who look like maybe they're starting to figure something out here. So 6 straight games that you're going to look at, and I would assume the Bucks are going to be favored in each of those 6 games coming up here. That look, if you can put that together and we see another lengthy win streak, let's say it's an 8-game win streak, you're all of a sudden talking about a team that is 10 games above 500 that started 2-8, and they'd be 22-12 if that's the case. So this was always the most important part of stopping the dig and getting out of that 2-8 hole was, okay, you're in the East. You have a favorable schedule in front of you. You have to win those games. If you do, you can put yourself in a spot. You have a chip and a chip and a chair, a chance at winning this thing. If you can do that, and that's what they've done so far. They've looked better against good teams. They've beaten some of those good teams, but that's still going to be the next step. Camille, is all right. You gotta win those games regularly. And I think for the most part, they've done that in the last month when presented that opportunity. The unfortunate part is the opportunity is essentially gone against the Cavs and the Celtics, that at best you're going to finish 1-6 against those two teams this season. I will say this, though, again, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but this just kind of speaks to your larger point of being in the Eastern Conference. The Bucks have the, I believe, 10th easiest remaining schedule in the league.
Wow.
And it doesn't feel like you've even gotten to the difficult part yet. That, okay, they're 21st right now in opponents' remaining win percentage. It's 6th most difficult in the Eastern Conference. So it just shows you, wow, it's all Western Conference teams. I mean, 1 through 10, the only teams in the East are the Knicks, Cavs, and Indiana Pacers. So those teams have pretty difficult stretches in front of them. The rest of the group outside of the top 10 is primarily Eastern Conference teams. So that's the benefit of being in the East is here's the schedule that's in front of you. Take advantage of it. And that's what the Bucks have really started to do more and more of consistently so far here in this recent stretch. Some final thoughts on this and that Bucks schedule that we just touched on, and thoughts on tonight's matchup with the Brooklyn Nets, because this is one of those games that, hey, the Bucks always traditionally would win these types of games. Can they keep it rolling tonight? We'll take a look after this on Locked On Bucks. Next segment on Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the perks and rates usually reserved for the high society. Now with Robinhood Gold, the resourceful individual can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. So it's a Brooklyn Nets team tonight that I think it's safe to say has already started to wave the white flag and is looking ahead to the possibility of adding somebody like Cooper Flagg next year with the Dennis Schroeder trade. They still have pieces you need to be worried about or at least monitor here for the Bucks. But, you know, when we said 6 straight games coming up against teams below 500, these are the important games to win, especially given that hole that you've already dug against those top 2 records in the Cavs and the Celtics. Like, it looks like other teams in the East, after a little bit of malaise, the New York Knicks with a nice win against Victor Wembanyama and an impressive Christmas Day debut, they keep winning. You're still 2 back in the Knicks in the loss column. The Magic, I mean, another day, another player goes out with injury, so there's a chance to keep winning and move past Orlando. But we mentioned even Philly, who's still a decent amount behind you. They're starting to win more consistently now. So it does seem like, look, it's still not the level of the West, but we're seeing Eastern Conference teams figure it out. So you got to beat these types of teams, these lower tier teams that you have on your schedule.
You absolutely do. And to the point about the Nets here, we know what's happening in Brooklyn with this team ever since the Dennis Schroeder trade. But on top of that as well, when you look at the injury report of who they expect to have out there tonight, there's no Cam Thomas, who has been like their best player outside the shoulder.
And a big thorn in the Bucks side.
A huge one, a bucket, a guy who has no hesitation of putting that shot up. So he's out tonight for the Nets. Ben Simmons is questionable. Dorian Finney-Smith is questionable. We know they don't have DeAnthony Melton for the rest of the season with that ACL tear, although he was acquired in that trade. No Bogdanovich still for them yet. No Trenton Wofford, no Zaire Williams. So, like, the guys who you would have the most fear of, quote unquote, on this Nets team probably won't be suiting up tonight. But yet and still, like, you can't go into that game without the proper energy, without the proper focus and execution. Like, they talked about it earlier in the season, where sometimes you just kind of think like, it's all right. Like, we can kind of go out here and we can do what we're going to do, and we're going to get this win. Like, still got to go out there and take care of business. Don't give the Nets any real hope, because when you look at what the Nets do well, it's not that much that they do super well on either side of the ball at this point in the season. So you can't necessarily play with your food, but you don't want to go out there at the same time and have a night where the Nets have a hot shooting night and then it becomes a game or something of that sort. So make sure you take care of business. But it's a Nets team that the front office has definitely waved that white flag. So it's just going to be on the players to see what they got.
It's one of those things that it has to be very challenging for the players and for first-year head coach too, Jordi Fernandez, of, you're a player, you're a coach, like, you're among the most competitive people in the world at this level, that you want to win all those games. And, you know, it's a very different objective from your front office. But to me, you know, we've talked quite a bit about where the Bucks have kind of trended in terms of their numbers, and games like this are great for 2 reasons. Not only does it hopefully boost your win total and help you continue that climb? But these are those get right games you would hope that boost all the other metrics as well, because it's a Brooklyn Nets team that you kind of touched on it briefly there. You struggle to find what they really do well. They get to the free throw line a decent amount, and they force a decent amount of turnovers on defense.
That's about it.
Yeah, that's the only thing that they do. Those are the only things defensively where they're inside of the bottom 5 in the league. I mean, effective field goal percentage for opponents, they're dead last. Defensive efficiency, they're 3rd or 4th to last. Free throw rate, in other words, the amount of times that they put opponents at the line, they're 2nd worst in the league. They're not a great defensive rebounding team either. They turn the ball over offensively a decent amount of time, and they have a middle of the pack offense. When you talk about some of those names like Cam Thomas, who we won't see, Cam Johnson as well. When they don't turn the ball over, it seems like, okay, they're fine offensively, but those instances are few and far between. So for the Bucks, hey, win this game, keep your climb there, which would put them 17-12 in the Eastern Conference. A game back of the Orlando Magic if you can win this game. And actually, I don't know if the Magic play tonight. I should have checked that. But you would still be just 2 games back in the loss column of the New York Knicks. And look, it's a pipe dream, I still believe, but it is worth pointing out after the results yesterday.
Yeah, I think it's fair to do so. And
you would just be 4 games back of the Celtics as the pipe dream that I'm mentioning in the loss column, because you're not going to have the tiebreaker. So you would have to outplay them by 5 games from here on out. But crazy things have happened, in terms of this team piecing things together, starting to be good teams as well. The Celtics may be suffering injuries or other slumps that it's suddenly not that, man, you're 8 or 9 games back in the loss column. Like, you can kiss it goodbye with the Cavs. You're not getting there, but you can't automatically write off catching the Celtics at this point.
It's a lot of basketball left to be played still. So like there's a chance out there. You got to take care of business. And the Magic do play tonight. They play the Heat, which the whole Jimmy Butler situation with that, like that, if that actually happens, could change the landscape in the East a bit, depending on where he goes and who comes back. But we can talk about that another day. We're talking about the Nets right now and the Bucks. So,
well, I will say though, Camille, if anybody wants to take victory laps with everything we had to deal with about Giannis asking for a move to Miami from all the reports that came out, feel free to do that in the comments. Just have at it, unfiltered. We're not going to check.
Nope. You'll just see some extra likes on your comments, probably from me, on YouTube when I'm going through the comments. But for this Bucks team, again, it's just taking care of business. When you look around the league and who else is playing around you, it's like the Pacers are playing the Thunder tonight. You have the Magic playing the Heat. You have the Hawks, who are hanging around 500 team. They're playing the Bulls tonight. And outside of that, in the East, like there's not much else shaking around you in the standings. So like keep an eye on them for sure, but continue to take care of business yourself. And for the Bucks on their side of things, as we record this, we still don't know necessarily if Giannis or Dame will be playing. They're both listed as questionable right now. Chris is probable, which that makes me smile to see Chris Middleton still being probable, how he's easing back into the rotation, the minutes and him playing back-to-backs and seeing he's available tonight does put a smile on my face, but not sure about Giannis and Dame at this point. We do know that Doc Rivers had mentioned during the last game, like, hey, it's the illness now for Dame. It's not the calf. So we know the calf's okay, but we're trying to figure out the illness piece of it all. So we'll see if Dame can actually go tonight. But regardless, I think that even if Dame and Giannis do not play, the Bucks should have enough to be able to beat this Nets team and get that win in Brooklyn tonight.
Yeah, and you don't want to start to push your luck. I mean, you should have enough, but man, if they play without Giannis and Dame and win for 3 consecutive games, that to me, regardless of who it is that you beat, that really says something. And again, when we talk about digging out of holes early on, you look up and down the standings of at least of the top 6 teams in the Eastern Conference, and the Bucks are the team that kind of stands out right now because the Cavs and the Celtics have just bludgeoned the Eastern Conference. They're combined 40-10 against the East. The Knicks are 14-7. The Magic are 15-7. And you got the Bucks at 14-11. And granted, 6 of those losses have come against the Cavs and the Knicks. 7 have come against the Cavs, Knicks, and Celtics. And that's the shame of it. you wish some of those could have been staggered throughout the year as this team started to play better. But the important part is those Giants are gone from your schedule. You got one more game with the Cavs. So start to advance that Eastern Conference number a little bit here. And the other thing that stands out is, look, it's not a great telltale because of the variables in schedule and everybody plays a different one. But again, looking up and down the Eastern Conference, there's 3 teams that of late, in terms of win-loss record, have been playing very, very good. The Cavs, the Knicks, and the Bucks. 9-1 for the Cavs, 8-2 for the Knicks, 7-3 for the Bucks in their last 10 games. And frankly, I mean, it's 8-3 in the last 11 games. Everybody else has been 6-4 or 5-5. That includes the Boston Celtics,
who are climbing back.
Sixers 7-3. Sorry, I cut them off
because they're so far down in the standings right now. I understand.
Still 11th. But yeah, I mean, that's the overall message from this is the Bucks have gotten a lot of gifts, as we touched on earlier in the show today, that it's tough to boil it down to just one thing that's really benefited them the most. There's been a lot. It's been a good Christmas season for the Bucks to get all these things coming in here. And you've done an excellent job of weathering the storm, coming out of that 2-8 start, getting to the point where they are now that they've lost just 4 games since then, 14-4 since a 2-8 start. I mean, again, point to the schedule all you want. You still have to win those games. And that's what they did. So you've put yourself in position to have a chance at anything, I think, at this point is on the table. You could tell me the Bucks finished second in the Eastern Conference. I would say, okay, I see a scenario. I see a path for that, given your 4 back of the Celtics in the loss column. You could tell me they finish 5th, and I would, if the Magic get healthy, the Knicks keep playing like they are, those 2 teams in the front keep playing like they are, 5th is reasonable, and I can expect that. So I think at this point, anything from 2 to 5 is on the table. Your point about the Heat and the Jimmy Butler murmurs, maybe I'm naive at this point. It does feel like the Bucks have kind of righted the ship, and I don't see them finishing lower than 5th, that it does feel like they've kind of asserted themselves there. And that's the big takeaways here is they've righted the ship, and now let's pick up some speed and some momentum on this cruise.
Yeah, I'm with that. I mean, again, it was a tough start to the season. We were sitting here like, what is happening exactly right now with this team? But they have righted the ship, and it continues tonight against Brooklyn, a team that they did lose to earlier in the season as well. So you gotta take care of what's in front of you, so you can't overlook any opponent. But for the Bucks, again, it's just taking care of business tonight, regardless of if Giannis and Dame are out there or not. You go ahead and you take care of business, get that win, continue climbing in that standings column, and get ready for your next couple of games that you have as well. Because as we mentioned, the next few, it's looking pretty good for the Milwaukee Bucks, because after you have this next game in Brooklyn or at home against Brooklyn, then you go to Chicago, you play at Indiana, you have Brooklyn again, Portland, Toronto, San Antonio, and then you get to that tougher stretch that you mentioned a little bit earlier. So take care of business, because up to that San Antonio game, you have some good comp to continue climbing the standings against.
We shall see. Hopefully tonight we are discussing another win here for the Bucks and up to 17-12 on the season. We will have a post-game show for you coming up tomorrow. We're still not quite sure who's going to be on that or when, but rest assured there will be a post-game show. Remember to leave your comments as well. What's the best gift you think the Bucks received this season? We'll recap some of that coming up on our next show. That'll do it for today, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.